He made me invisible, humiliated me, and controlled me, but I got up stronger. I never imagined I'd write something like this, but I need to get it out there. Maybe someone going through what I've experienced can see themselves in this and find some strength. I've always been the kind of person who believed that love solved everything, that patience and understanding were enough to sustain any relationship. My name is Regina, I'm 32 years old, and at the time of this story, I worked at a marketing company, lived alone in a small apartment, and was experiencing what I considered a moment of fulfillment. I thought I'd finally found a true partner. Lucas showed up, full of smiles, full of attention. He was the kind of man who sent good morning texts, who asked if I'd had lunch yet, who seemed to genuinely care. After failed relationships, with an ex who made me feel like I was always second best, I clung to the idea that Lucas was the answer I'd been waiting for. And, for a while, it really did seem that way. The problem is that time has a cruel way of revealing who people really are. At first, Lucas's displays of care filled me with security, but I soon realized that his attention was tinged with jealousy. All it took was a coworker tagging me in a post, or Fabio, my ex, sending a random message, and Lucas would transform. He didn't yell, but his accusatory manner and acidic jokes kept me on constant alert. I found myself justifying every move, every like, every trivial conversation, as if I constantly needed to prove my innocence. And when I tried to argue, he'd turn the tables and say I didn't understand what respect in a relationship meant. The crazy thing is, I believed him. I believed I was wrong for failing to reassure him that I must have done something wrong, when in reality, I was just living. The straw that broke the camel's back was when his friends, especially Clovis, entered the picture. I have nothing against friendships, but there's a difference between true friends and people who only serve to drag you down. Clovis loved to joke about women, including me, and Lucas would laugh, as if it were funny. Sometimes he'd even repeat the jokes later, in the middle of an argument, and it ate away at me. I smiled on the outside, but inside I felt smaller and smaller. I even told him that it hurt me, and he'd say, "Oh, you take everything too seriously. Relax." The word relax became a kind of sentence. I felt suffocated, but I thought, complaining would only make me seem annoying or controlling. So I kept quiet. I kept quiet for fear of losing someone I thought I loved. But it's funny how the body reacts before the mind even admits it. I started to feel a weight on my chest, an anxiety that accompanied me in the simplest moments, like getting ready to go out. I remember one party in particular. It was a friend of Lucas's birthday, and I spent hours choosing an outfit, trying to look good, trying to be seen by him as a woman, worthy of him. But when I got there, he simply ignored me. He spent the entire night surrounded by people, laughing loudly, drinking, paying excessive attention to other women, as if I were invisible. I smiled mechanically, responded when someone started a conversation, but inside I just wanted to disappear. It was as if I'd been invited to watch my own humiliation, and when I got home I didn't cry. I just remained silent, staring at the ceiling, feeling like something inside me had broken. It was at this point that my friend Patricia stepped in with a sincerity that at first hurt more than it helped. She said to me, "Regina, don't you realize he doesn't respect you? That you're accepting crumbs?" I was angry with her. Who did she think she was to talk about my relationship? But the truth is, her words echoed in my head. I spent days trying to ignore it, but every time Lucas made a rude comment, every time I suppressed the urge to say, "I don't like it," Patricia's voice returned. I began to realize it wasn't just about jealousy or inconvenient friends. It was about dignity, and I was losing myself. The problem is, even realizing this, I still didn't have the courage to break up. It's amazing how we cling to even what hurts us, afraid of the emptiness that might follow. I started noticing small changes in my behavior. Before, I loved hanging out with my coworkers after work, laughing at our inside jokes, sharing stories. But little by little, I started avoiding it. I was afraid Lucas would get suspicious, that someone was interested in me. Nadia, a very observant colleague, started to notice and would make subtle comments. "You've disappeared from our outings, Regina. I wonder if someone's been keeping tabs on you." She said it with a laugh, as if dropping hints, but it got to me. I laughed along, hiding it, but inside I was brooding. Was I really losing myself? And the answer was yes. I was increasingly in control without even needing Lucas to ask me to. I policed myself, I kept quiet, I adapted. It was as if I'd become a smaller version of myself, to fit what he thought was right. There was a day that really affected me. Fabio, my ex, insisted on staying in touch, and I always tried to maintain a respectful distance. But one morning, he texted me asking about a book I still had of his. I hadn't even had time to respond when Lucas saw the notification on my phone. It was as if the world had stopped for a few seconds. He didn't yell, he didn't break anything, but his look was accusatory, as if I'd committed a crime. And I, desperate, started to justify myself. It's just a book, I didn't even say anything to him. But something inside me screamed. I realized I was explaining myself as guilty for something I hadn't done. And worse, I realized I'd already grown accustomed to this role. The feeling was devastating. I spent the rest of the day with a queasy stomach, as if I'd swallowed rocks. The cycle was like this. He'd do something. That diminished me, I'd swallow it, and in the end, I'd always apologize for not knowing how to handle it. I remember spending sleepless nights staring at my phone, waiting for a text from him after an argument, as if that good night was proof we still had a chance. And when the text didn't come, I'd cry silently. In the morning, I'd put on makeup to hide my puffy eyes and go to work as if nothing had happened. On the outside, I was the balanced, efficient, funny woman. Inside, I was in pieces. And the cruelest thing was looking in the mirror and not recognizing myself. I'd lost the sparkle in my eyes, the lightness that had always accompanied me. I saw myself tired, heavy, always on alert. I wasn't myself anymore, and yet I remained there, trapped, until the day of the party that turned my life around arrived. I've already said that Lucas left me behind, but what I'll never forget is the physical sensation of that moment. I was sitting on a couch, holding a glass of soda that was no longer carbonated, and I watched him dance with other people, laughing loudly, as if I didn't exist. My throat burned, my eyes burned, but I refused to cry in front of everyone. I just took deep breaths, once, twice, 10 times, trying not to break down. When we left in the car, he asked, "Why are you upset? You're so dramatic, Regina." I didn't answer. I just looked out the window and thought, I don't want to live this anymore. It was the first time my mind screamed louder than my heart. But deciding isn't the same as succeeding. I spent weeks struggling internally. I wanted to break up, but fear paralyzed me. Fear of being alone, fear of regret, fear of not finding someone who truly wanted me. And at the same time, I was angry at myself for letting it get to this point. I cried in the shower so as not to disturb anyone. I curled up in bed as if I could disappear. There were days when I thought about texting him just to get back to my routine, even though I knew it would hurt me. It's strange how we miss even the things that hurt, just because they're familiar. But deep down, I knew. Staying there would slowly destroy me. And it was this certainty, mixed with the pain, that gave me the first spark of courage. I remember the day I finally decided to change. It wasn't a major external event. It was more of an internal wake-up call. I woke up with puffy eyes after another pointless argument with Lucas the night before. I got up, went to the bathroom, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a different person. My hair was messy, dark circles were deep under my eyes, my mouth was dry, and I had a huge void in my eyes. And then it clicked. If I stay here, I'll disappear from myself. It was as if, for the first time, I was seeing myself from the outside. I sat on the edge of my bed, took a deep breath, and wrote on a piece of paper. What do I want for myself? And everything I wrote had to do with peace, respect, and self-love. I realized I wasn't getting or giving any of that to myself while I was with him. That piece of paper stayed in my bag for weeks, like a lucky charm, a reminder of what I deserved. I started small. First, I completely cut off contact with Fabio. Not because he was the problem, but because I realized that maintaining that connection only fueled more arguments and distrust. Then I started saying no to situations that made me uncomfortable, even though I was shaking inside. If Lucas made a harsh comment, I'd calmly tell him I didn't like it. Sometimes he'd laugh, sometimes he'd get angry, but I wouldn't back down. I could feel my whole body trembling after these small statements, but it was a different kind of tremor, one of fear mixed with relief. It was as if I were relearning how to use my own voice. Patricia helped me a lot in this process. She was that friend who wouldn't pat me on the head, but would comfort me when I faltered. Of course, it wasn't a linear path. There were days when I backed down, when I apologized without feeling guilty, when I wanted to go back on my decisions. Emotional dependence doesn't disappear out of nowhere. It's like an addiction. You know it's bad for you, but you miss it. I cried a lot, blamed myself, questioned myself. Sometimes I thought I was exaggerating, that maybe Lucas wasn't so bad after all. But then a new situation would arise, a new sign of disrespect, and I'd remember the note in my bag. I'd look at those simple words and take a deep breath. This process gradually strengthened me, showing me that I could, indeed, live without that cycle of pain. When I finally broke up with Lucas, it wasn't dramatic. There was no yelling, no fighting. I just sat down with him and told him I couldn't do it anymore. My voice was shaking, my hands were sweating, but I was determined. He tried to argue, giving me that familiar look of regret, but I didn't give in. For the first time, I didn't cry in front of him. I got up and left. In the car, driving home, I cried so hard I had to pull over to the side of the road. It was a cry of pain, but also of release. I knew I was entering an unknown phase, and it scared me, but at the same time, it made me feel alive again. In the first few days after the breakup, I felt lost. The silence I'd once dreaded now accompanied me throughout the apartment. At night, I'd find myself staring at my phone, waiting for a message that wouldn't come. The bed felt huge, empty, but little by little, that emptiness began to transform into space. Space for myself, for my desires, for rebuilding my life. I started going out with Patricia again, talking more with my colleagues, laughing without fear of who would see. I started reading again, listening to my favorite music, cooking for myself, little things I'd stopped doing. It was a slow process, but each gesture felt like a piece of me returning to its place. Little by little, I began to notice physical and emotional changes that surprised me. My body, previously tense and heavy with anxiety, began to relax. The sleepless nights diminished. My stomach no longer churned with every message I received. It was as if every act of independence, no matter how small, had a direct effect on my body. I felt my shoulders loosen, my smile return, my eyes regain their sparkle. Even my memories, which had previously hurt, began to take on a different color. I remembered the bad times, but without blaming myself, without feeling incapable. It was at that point that I understood that rebuilding wasn't just about breaking up with someone, but about rediscovering every piece of myself that I had given up or lost. Anger still surfaced from time to time, but it no longer dominated me. I could feel it, acknowledge it, and let it go. I remember once running into Lucas on a busy street after the breakup. I felt butterflies in my stomach. But instead of chasing him or hiding, I continued on my way. And there, in that moment, I realized that the strength I needed had always been within me. He no longer had power over my emotions. And that was liberating. I could exist on my own, without needing validation from him or anyone else. I began to realize that life was still full of possibilities, and that I could allow myself to seize each of them, without fear of making mistakes. During this period, I also needed to rebuild my trust in friendships. Patricia was a pillar, of course, but I realized that there were people around me who also put me down, who reinforced my insecurities. I began to distance myself from Nadia's mean comments and indirect remarks, which had previously left me confused. I relied on the support of other friends and coworkers who showed their sincerity, and I carefully chose where to invest my energy. This filter was essential. I learned that respecting my space and my emotions isn't selfishness, but survival. Every time I said no to something that hurt me, I felt like I was rewriting my story. Today, looking back, I see how painful it was to realize I accepted humiliation in the name of love. I blamed myself, hated myself, and thought I deserved nothing more than crumbs of attention. But now I understand that true love doesn't humiliate, doesn't diminish, or makes anyone feel invisible. I know there are still days when I miss someone, or when my mind revisits memories that make me tremble, but it doesn't scare me anymore. I've learned that it's not about forgetting, but about moving forward, consciously, without repeating patterns. Every tear I shed, every night of anguish, every doubt that gnawed at me were part of the process that brought me to this point. Today, I feel whole again. Not perfect, far from it, but in control of my life, my choices, my happiness. I learned to set clear boundaries, to value my dignity, to respect my emotions. I learned that it's possible to love and still respect yourself, and that worthwhile love, the kind that builds, doesn't need justifications, doesn't demand sacrifices that hurt the soul. I've managed to reconnect with my passions, my dreams, my essence. With each passing day, I realize that life is mine, that my decisions matter, and that no one has the power to dim my light except myself. After rebuilding myself, I realized that life has a curious way of teaching us. I used to believe that suffering was inevitable, that love hurt and needed to be proven. Today, I understand that suffering comes when we lose our sense of self, when we stop putting ourselves first. I started taking care of myself genuinely, exercising, meditating, writing about my feelings, going out with friends, exploring new places. Each of these gestures, however simple, became a part of my recovery. I rediscovered my appreciation for small joys, those that previously went unnoticed because I was too busy trying to please someone who didn't even value me. Anger, fear, and insecurity still linger, of course. It's not a process that ends suddenly, but the difference is that now I know how to deal with them. When I feel jealousy, anxiety, or sadness, I stop and reflect. This is mine, not his. This is my experience, not my fault. This exercise strengthens me and keeps me mindful. I started writing lists of my achievements, of the times I said no and respected myself. Each small victory is fuel. I realized that emotional independence isn't just about cutting off toxic relationships, but about learning to love yourself, respect yourself, and no longer losing yourself to someone else. Today, I can look at Lucas without pain, simply as an experience that taught me. I don't hold a grudge, but I've learned to recognize signs I previously ignored. I know life won't be perfect, that future relationships may be difficult, but now I know I can face anything without losing my self-worth or feeling suffocated. My heart feels light again, and I no longer depend on anyone to validate my happiness. Every step I took was hard work, full of fear and doubt, but it was worth it. Today, when I look at my reflection, I see a woman who survived and grew, and that is priceless. What I want to say most to anyone going through the same thing is, you deserve to put yourself first. Don't expect anyone to recognize your worth. Learn to recognize yourself. Don't accept anything less than respect, genuine attention, and true care. The pain of a breakup, of separation, of loneliness is heavy, but it's also a teacher. It's the moment when you discover your strength, your resilience, and above all, your self-love. It's possible to rebuild. It's possible to reinvent yourself. It's possible to feel whole again. I'm living proof of this. The path isn't quick or easy, but the reward is being with yourself, without fear, without excuses. Today, more than ever, I know that love doesn't have to humiliate or hurt. I know that my life doesn't depend on anyone's approval. I've learned to identify healthy relationships, to value people who respect me, and to never lose myself. What seemed like the end was actually the beginning of a new life, more conscious, more confident, and full of possibilities. I still have my bad days. I still remember moments that made me suffer, but now I choose how to react. I choose to live for myself, for my dreams, and for my happiness. And the feeling of freedom, of being whole, is incomparable. It's the kind of victory no one can take away, and that makes every tear, every fear, and every fall worth it.